Hey everyone, I'm Nick from Watch Collecting, and we're down at London HQ today to talk about a very, very big brand on a significant anniversary. There's plenty to unpack and talk about today. I'm joined by my good friend and watch enthusiast, Emily Marsden. Thanks for coming down.
Always a pleasure.
Couldn't think of a better person to have this chat with. But first, before we dive into this, as always, I feel like everyone wants to know what's on the wrist. So let's do a wrist check. What are you wearing today?
It felt only right to go back and I haven't worn this for a few months, but it's the 3755 perpetual calendar, 1986, first crown operated perpetual calendar, which is a beautiful link, I think, to AP's recent release with their crown operated.
It's a good choice, and I wanted to ask you about this watch because I've been to a watch event with you while you've been wearing that, and I think to say it's a conversation starter, it's an understatement. I think everyone we walked up and talked to wanted to know about that watch.
Yeah.
Is that the most talked about watch that you own when it's on the wrist?
It's so funny you should say that. It's sort of got to a point now where if I don't wear it, I've realised no one really cares if I'm there or not. Like, have you got the 3755? Oh, and I don't really care what else I'm wearing or how my day was. Just me and this watch have become quite. Somebody actually said to me, I just couldn't imagine you not having that watch now. And in the world of watches, we switch and we change, but I think this one's here to stay. It's become quite synonymous, and I love it, so it's all good.
Very nice.
What about you?
I've got the Panerai PAM 112. I've been in a lot of discussions with people recently about Panerai because small watches are in, big watches have been out for quite a while now, and I kind of feel like maybe Panerai is coming back a little bit.
For sure.
I'm a big fan of the brand. I've been around in the watch scene long enough to remember the early 2000s when the brand was so popular.
Yep.
No one could get hold of them. They weren't in boutiques like what Rolex has been in the last few years. So I kind of look at Panerai with rose-tinted glasses a little bit, and I just love the brand, despite the fact that they are quite big.
I'd love to see them come back. I'm hearing a lot of that, actually. They're cool. The design code is cool. Maybe a little bit messy at the moment, but right, well, you said it first. You heard it here first.
Let's hope they work it out and get back on track. But the topic of today is Audemars Piguet. Now, I thought we'd frame this conversation in the context of where the watch market's going right now, because everyone knows that AP has enjoyed a lot of success over the past 15, 20 years, driven primarily by the Royal Oak, which has been a phenomenon in the watch world. But you only have to dig online to read about people's experiences with customer service at AP, and also in the context of independent watchmaking and the prevalence of that in the market right now, to start to wonder what is happening with Audemars Piguet right now. And I think on such a significant anniversary, 150th year, it's the right time to look at the brand and say, like, are they still the brand they were before? And are they set up for success in the future? So within that context, how do you feel about AP as a brand in 2025?
That's a huge question. How do I feel? A little bit of context. As a collector and enthusiast, I probably have a natural predisposition to want the best, especially for brands like AP. It's sort of like the thing where you have this deep desire for them to just do well, to do their thing, to flourish. And any sort of criticism comes from that place. There's a wonderful Instagram account, Horology Ancienne. I don't know if you've come across it. It's a father and son. And they are huge collectors and certainly very, very prevalent in the AP world. And they have this similar sort of thing where they're really happy to talk about what's amazing, but also really quite positively critical, if that makes sense. They'll say, you're sort of deviating from what you're about. So what do I feel about them? For me, AP will always be one of the best. It's 150 years, it's got rich history. What does it represent? I think we'll probably end up talking about it. It's not just the Royal Oak. If you go back into the AP archives, it's just insane. If you look at AP perpetuals, wild. The stuff that they've produced and the way in which they have advanced horology and made collecting so embedded into popular culture. There's nobody quite like them in that way. So for me, AP, for as much as right now, or certainly over the last few years, I've not been the biggest advocate of the way they've done some things, they are singular in what they produce. I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon.
So I guess I'd stop short of saying they're too big to fail, but you think that their position in the market is strong enough that even with some slightly dubious vetting processes for people in boutiques of buying watches and waiting lists and customer service, it's questionable. You still think that their position in the market right now is strong and will remain that way?
Yeah, look, I think loads of brands in the past few years maybe made some mistakes when the hype was crazy, and it must have been awful for them managing demand. In fact, just on a personal note, I had a similar story, and I spoke to AP about it, and they were amazing. They sort of apologised and didn't want it to be that way. So people are allowed to get things wrong, and I think during those hype years, brands got things a little bit wrong. But if you boil it down a little bit, we're people, and maybe they're overwhelmed, whatever. It's more for me is how they come back from it and how many other brands now come back from it. I don't think a few years of sort of customer service errors I don't think that's enough to sink somebody like AP. That sort of misses what they're about. It's not that they're too big to fail. If they started producing awful watches that fell apart, then maybe. But I think their legacy and their importance is so big that it would be quite reductive to say that AP is failing because of a small period of history where, granted, even their biggest collectors have had problems with them. I think that's sort of the natural cycle of business.
So if that's the position of the brand now, I think it's worth talking about why they became so popular. And we were speaking before about their willingness and, I guess, enthusiasm around collaboration.
Yes.
And it's such a big part of the watch industry now, but it didn't used to be.
Yeah.
And AP has always been very keen to get in, collaborate with people, particularly around sports and entertainment.
Yep.
And I think that's been a massive part of their success. I mean, obviously the Royal Oak, which we'll get to in a bit and we'll talk about it, but let's touch on the collaboration, because I think they're the pioneers of that in the watch world.
Without a doubt. Which stands out to you in terms of collaboration?
To me, I think of the 90s. I think of the
the Arnies.
The Arnies, yeah, because they were very happy to take the Royal Oak, which was a quite subtle design in many respects. It was quite thin when you think about the original Jumbo, the reference 5402. They brought in the offshore. They made it big. They made it bold. They catered for that type of market.
Yep.
And they weren't afraid to go out on a limb and change the design of their watches to cater for collaborations like that. So that's the type of collabs that jump out to me immediately.
For sure.
Yeah, the action heroes.
That's the action heroes, yeah, like the Arnie sort of. I want that era of Sylvester Stallone, and they're sort of like really jacked, big sort of icons of that time. And you think of the massive blacked out, just whatever, like indestructible watches. And we talk about AP and collaborations. And actually something you said there about being willing to sort of push the boat out. Most AP watches, I mean, you look at the Royal Oak, it wasn't successful when it came out. It was avant-garde, it changed the rules, all of these things that we look back at now and see as a guaranteed success. It really wasn't how it played out. But coming to the collaboration thing, I think even recently, you take the 90s and the sports, the Nick Faldo watches, they have a rich history with understanding culture and bringing culture into watchmaking. So when some of the criticism you read online now is, I didn't like the Travis Scott, whatever, you might not like it, but it's not new for AP to do that. AP have been, I think, again, very singular in understanding culture and popular culture, what's cool right now. Whether you like that or not, that's kind of their thing. The John Mayer, for me, the most recent John Mayer, again, I'm sure people will disagree. That man is a watch nerd. He's also very, very into watch culture. And they brought him in, and I don't know whether he's paid. I would believe it if he's not. I believe that he would care enough and be so happy to be involved in the mechanisms of it. And the watch that he released, I think AP and collaborations is part of their DNA, personally.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, to use John Mayer as an example, his affection for AP, to me, seems very genuine.
Yeah.
And I also look at people like Ed Sheeran. I think his interest in the brand is also very genuine as well. And that really, to me, ties into how successful AP has been in collaborating with pop culture and people in that industry. And I think about the Holy Trinity. Vacheron and Patek haven't really ever delved into that realm properly. No. And when I compare that to AP, they seem to be or have an understanding of how to market their brand.
Yeah.
And they have been really successful with doing that. It's been a big part of their success in the past 15, 20 years.
I think they make it young. Okay, when you think of, say, a 3940 from Patek, beautiful watch, one of my favourite perpetuals of all time, but it is very elegant, very refined, kind of hard to wear if you're not, I don't know, maybe wearing a suit or something. But then you look at a Royal Oak and you put a perpetual calendar in it. It's almost like you make the perpetual calendar young and interesting and fun, and then people evolve their watch tastes. They're very good at catering for that. And of course you can still wear it. I'm not saying you can't wear it with a suit. You can wear whatever you want. But they are very different to the other two in that they are young and unapologetically creative. And I think that's their thing. That's their DNA. A bit more risk taking.
On risk taking and collaborations.
I can see where this is going.
I was speaking to a client about this very topic because it's AP's 150th year. A lot of people talking about it. And they asked me, do you think that the Marvel collaborations have positively or negatively impacted the brand? And I was curious to get your take on that.
Oh, you're going to throw me in first. You're not going to give your take.
Yeah, I'm throwing you under the bus first.
Right, good to know. Good to know. Right, what do I think? So you've got the Marvel, so you've got the Black Panther.
Yep.
And then the Spider-Man. And they did, I think for both, they did a unique piece of both, didn't they? The Spider-Man was the blacked out Spider-Man that was a piece unique, and the rest were coloured. And I think the same for the Black Panther. I'm not 100% sure. What do I think of them? 2021-ish, 2023? Okay, what do I think of them? They're not for me. Even if I had all the money in the world, wouldn't have bought one. In fact, I think a few months, maybe a year ago when we first met, you had a Black Panther here. It was really cool to sort of see it in the flesh. But what does it mean for the brand? It's a collaboration, and it's a pop culture collaboration. Whose wrists do we see them on? I think LeBron James had the Black Panther. I'm coming away from having an opinion here. What do I think? It's not for me. It did do some damage in the very upper echelons of, not necessarily in terms of money spent, but in terms of depth of connection to AP. I don't think collectors that have been around the brand for a long time really understood it or valued it. Certainly amongst the collectors that I've been lucky to sort of meet over time, I've not seen them on their wrists. However, for as much as I say this, technically quite interesting, super skeletonized. I think it's full silver. They're laser machined at full silver. 50-something hours of work goes into the actual figurine. The only person I can think of that validates it potentially is Mr. Mayer himself. The end of the famous, notorious Hodinkee episode where they both go out and they buy the Spider-Man, which I don't know. Maybe that means that we're missing something. Maybe it is a piece of AP history that we'll look back at and go, oh, that was smart. I'm not there yet. I don't quite. Would AP be any different if they hadn't have done it? That's a good thought experiment. If they never released them, would it matter? Maybe not. If they never existed, would it matter?
Maybe not. And I think to diehard watch people, they take offense at these types of releases and they think it's like going to ruin the brand and like it's all over, they've sold out. But ultimately they release the watch, it does well in the mainstream and they just move on and keep making more watches. And that to me is where they're at with these Marvel collaborations. I don't really see it damaging the brand as a whole. I think it's upset diehard collectors, and I get that because I didn't particularly like them either. But in terms of brand success, it's kind of hard to argue with them.
I'm really racking my brains on who I've seen them. It's largely the sort of because they're so expensive as well. That's not your first AP. It's also not your first luxury purchase. It's quite a niche market. It's not. You're not buying it to further your sort of collection. It is quite a whimsical piece. It doesn't offend me. If they carried on and did every Marvel character, I think they've got what they need out of it. It's cool, but it doesn't have to be for you for it to be good, and that's fine. I think it's fine for the brand. I don't think they should continue doing it to the nth degree, but it's fine.
Well, I guess if we're now talking about the most extreme examples from AP, let's go back and talk about where the Royal Oak began.
Yes.
And the models that, for me personally, I'm most drawn to. So in 2022, the Royal Oak turned 50.
Yeah, big year.
They released a range of watches, not really outside of the normal releases. I think there were some special editions which were unique to that year. But what they did do was put a 50th anniversary rotor on the movement, which I thought was a nice touch. It was like they didn't move too far away from what they know and what they're good at, but it was just a special way of commemorating the watch. And I do think the watches that have the 50th anniversary rotor feel special.
Agree.
But one of the watches that we have on the table here, which I personally really like, is the 37 millimeter version of the model with this kind of ice blue dial in steel. For me, this is the perfect Royal Oak. It's a little bit smaller. It's got a simple layout. It's like what the watch was originally intended to be, in steel, on a bracelet. And for me, this is where AP is at its strongest.
I'm with you. I thought the 50th releases with the open case back, and so actually on the 34 mil, if you see how on the 50th it's sort of cut out, on the 34 mil it wasn't. It was a solid block, which just didn't quite feel as special, but I guess the caliber's different and so on. AP, for as much as people, I don't know, like to speculate on whether brands are one watch brands, Patek is bigger than the 5711, or AP is bigger than the Royal Oak. All these brands are bigger, but they just have a darling, and this is undoubtedly the darling. But I agree with you. I think 37 mil, obviously the jumbo is iconic, and it will always remain as sort of the core Royal Oak. But it is. I think. This actual. And sorry if I'm wrong here, but I don't think I am. This dial colour was specific for the 50th anniversary. They still make it now, but it was brand new, which I think this was probably the most popular one at the time to get. I think I asked and they politely said no. But it's a perfect watch. It's a perfect watch. I agree.
Something you said there I found interesting, where you were saying that the brand is bigger than the Royal Oak, but it made me think about a watch line that we don't have on the table here, but I think we need to discuss.
Is it?
It's the code.
It's the code.
The code 1159. Bad names aside, I think it's worth chatting about that line and its impact on the brand, because I personally think that AP is a one-watch brand, and it's struggled to shake that image. Even though, as you alluded to at the beginning, they have such an amazing history in watchmaking, the Royal Oak, they're almost a victim of its success in that everyone just wants that watch. And you only have to go into a boutique and see that there's a row of code 1159s in the window and no Royal Oaks to realise that that's the watch people want. So I wanted to put that to you, because another conversation I had off camera with a client, we were talking about, can AP shake that image of being the Royal Oak brand? And do you think that the code 1159 now has started to pique interest of collectors? Because I'll be honest, when it first came out, I thought that the name and I thought that the designs weren't good. Yeah.
I don't think you're on your own on that one. I think people didn't. And the design has changed so much. Okay, let me give this a. I want to answer this thoughtfully and not be reactive about it, because I think it's an important question, but it also just widely across the watch market. So, I don't know, if we take Omega, they are the Speedmaster brand. If we take Patek, they are the Nautilus brand, maybe even the Aquanaut recently. AP, of course, Royal Oak. You can probably, Rolex, maybe the GMT, maybe a sub.
Yeah, you could say Tudor Black Bay for
Tudor.
Yeah.
You can probably do it across IWC, a big pilot, maybe. You've got to throw them in, and you can probably do it across every brand. So it's probably unfair to say it is a one-watch brand. I also think that's quite a modern view of AP. It's in the sense, if you go back to the 90s, the 70s, the 80s, and you look at their perpetuals and the Tuscan dials and the variations and the way they pushed the market in that era, and even the offshore when it came out, that it was a bit different. It was a bit avant-garde. I don't think they're a one-watch brand. I think they have a darling, and that's fine. That's not going anywhere. People will always want a jumbo, and it has such great history. But taste will change. We will move away from. Well, we've already moved away from integrated sports steel bracelets, and we're moving into different things. I think there's a lot more smaller watches, time only. And AP, I would love to see them go back into their archives and bring back some of the perpetual calendars of old, in the traditional shapes, because we don't see them anymore. They're just not in the current catalogue, which maybe brings me to the code 1159, which is an evolution of, it takes that old case shape, just a standard, what you expect a watch to look like, puts the AP octagonal, sandwiched in the middle. It's quite smart, really. I personally really like the code. Maybe we'll have to get our boxing gloves on for this one. I think where they're at with the code right now is potentially on the precipice of something interesting. Even again, I do reference these big collectors. I think it's not a money thing. It's just they're deep in the brand and they've worn them all. They've had them all. And again, I reference Horology Ancienne here, who I regard him as quite a scholar on the topic, and even he would say, I didn't like it, but now I own one. And of course, it's a sort of flying tourbillon with an onyx dial or something. But I think that is a good marker to say that actually AP is recognising that the AP will always be about the Royal Oak, but they're once again they are trying to do something different. And again, I don't think it's fair to say they're a one-watch brand. They're trying to do something different. They're evolving the code. I think the code now with the no numerals, the baton dial, the ceramic case, they're just evolving it. And they just brought out the smaller version, I think it's 37 mil, maybe 38. I now genuinely do want to own a time-only code. And that's not just to sort of try and be different, but it's because I think it will become an interesting part of AP's history. But if you look, somebody in your office actually was wearing the Edward Piguet, which was amazing. The AP, it's not fair to call AP a one-watch brand because AP has one of the most interesting archives of all the brands in terms of case shapes, dials. They've done so much over the years, and maybe we'll see them bring that sort of stuff back. But I think to say it's about the Royal Oak is quite a recent view on AP. So come back at that.
As I said, I didn't like the code when it came out,
Nope.
and I stand by that. And I still don't like the name. What I think has changed on the code is I think that they've doubled down on it and they've thrown everything at it, and it's worked. They've refined the design. They've put all sorts of high complications in it. Some that are unique to the code that don't exist in the Royal Oak line. Gem set codes. I mean, they've really gone to town on that line, and I think they've done a good job. And to me, the critical point was when they released the steel versions, time only, and incorporated this sort of concentric gear shape pattern.
Nice.
And I was like, this is what
it's unique.
It is, and it's
unique.
like, this is what the tapisserie is
to the Royal Oak. That's a good point.
It's now got an identity, and they've refined it. And to me, I've started to look at code 1159 now and go, oh, I kind of want one of those.
I get it.
I get it. And to me, the biggest telling point of that was looking at the watches they released for the 150th anniversary. Because I looked at that and I was like, they did a swan song to the old perpetual calendar skeleton in the Royal Oak. And I was looking at that and I was like, great watch. But then I saw the code 1159 perpetual in that blue dial. And I was like, I really want that watch.
It's so nice.
Whether someone would still choose that over a Royal Oak perpetual, I don't think they would.
I would choose that.
Okay.
That one. Okay, a few reasons though. One, it incorporates their new perpetual calendar movement, so completely crown operated, so no pushers. It's almost unbreakable. There's no sort of death zone of you can't change it. And for me, this is why I think this watch is a great sort of. It's the starting point, right? They took my favourite watch in the world and refined it. They've made it better. They have done what AP do, and they've technically improved something. They've made a perpetual calendar that is indestructible. Anybody can use it, anybody can wear it. And they've put it in a very refined code that looks amazing. That blue dial is just sensational. I think the community of the watch world agreed that was a nice watch. That's probably the first code that's ever happened to. What a phenomenal watch. And if they carry on down that route, I think that watch actually has some provenance in AP's history. And that's maybe why I would buy it, because I think it's not in my remit right now, but I think that's an important watch for AP.
So if we're saying then that AP isn't a one-watch brand, which I slightly disagree with, the question next is, if the code starts to work, and AP is looking at their catalogue and they're thinking integrated bracelet sport watches aren't as popular as they were before, where else can we diversify? Where else can AP go? And when I was thinking about this question, I was like, one of the watches that I wanted to talk about with you was the Quantium Perpetual.
So good.
Because as we were speaking about off camera, this year at Watches and Wonders, it became apparent that dress watches with intricate bracelets were a theme of the show. They were popular. I would say two of the most spoken about watches at Watches and Wonders were the Reverso with the Milanese bracelet, which was amazing, incredible watch. And also the fact that Rolex released its first new bracelet in years and put an intricate bracelet on the 1908. So that got me thinking, could AP bring back the Quantum Perpetual just like this one on an intricate bracelet and introduce this line back into the catalogue?
Honestly, I think if AP did this, you said to me, "What? I don't think Royal Oak. I think this when I think AP. Personally, this is just where my mind goes. If AP did that, I think that their core fan base would go wild. I actually don't know why they've not done it. I mean, I guess, you know, like any business, you can only focus on a few things at a time. But this is core AP. This is why I take issue with the idea that they're a one-watch brand. They're so rich. I mean, look at that bracelet. It's a sensational bracelet. What is a watch? What isn't? It's not just the way it looks. It's not just the movement. The bracelet is a big part of it too, or the strap. You know, however you configure it. If AP brought this back, it would be wild. I mean, these are also doing crazy numbers at auction these days. You know, the rare of the rare. I've mentioned the Tuscan Dial quite a few times, just because that's sort of my favourite and heavily inspired Mr. Mayer's watch, which, you know, definitely takes. Well, it's just so similar in a beautiful way, just more modern. What about you? I mean, I've toyed with adding one of these to my collection for a long, long time. I just didn't, and I haven't. I don't know why. I think that I'm fear of the servicing cost, to be honest, but I can't fault it. What about you?
Well, I think the story of that watch is legendary. Like, most people say the Royal Oak saved AP, but equally, the story behind this watch is amazing because it was like when we spoke about quartz in our last video. At that time, Swiss watch brands were struggling, and this story of this perpetual calendar movement is amazing. You know, they worked on this after hours. Well, that's how the story goes. Anyway.
Good marketing.
Yeah, great marketing. But they ended up inventing the thinnest automatic perpetual calendar movement in the world.
Right, they did, yeah.
And so it's a very important part of AP's history. And I think now with dress watches becoming so popular, this would be a fantastic opportunity for AP to diversify their catalogue and reintroduce this watch.
You know, you make a good point. If we actually just take the perpetual calendar for a minute and rewind, let's skip the pocket watch era and go into wristwatches. I think it was Patek that did it first, closely followed by AP. AP were the first to do it with the, I think, a leap year indicator is what AP did first, and then they made the thinnest version in the 70s. So again, that's what a history.
Yeah.
They are. I think we also sort of we forget that it's not just a luxury item that, you know, the dial changed or whatever. These are people sat behind their bench really just thinking every day about how to improve something, or they want a legacy. AP are just, what is their next evolution of AP? This is such a big part of their story to have been a key player in developing the perpetual calendar. And even the current perpetual, it's super thin. What is it? The R&D version of it. It's the name evades me, but it's the thinnest perpetual calendar because they basically figured out a way to move all of the parts of the movement around in such a way. I think it's in an offshore, in such a way that allows this mega thin movement, highly technical, highly complicated. And now you've got me. I could deal with the pushers as well. I like the romantic idea of, you know, getting the pusher out, and that's the way I change my watch. For as much as I say that the new caliber is amazing,
I think it's appealing on a vintage watch.
So you're saying not on a modern?
Not so much, no.
Okay.
Because I sort of think part of the engineering side of it is being able to deal with issues like that and ultimately making it convenient. So for me, it's like, get rid of the pushes.
Move on. I want to be able to jump in the pool, make it fully waterproof.
Yep.
And I don't want any pushers.
Absolutely.
Crown operated.
Absolutely.
Imagine they brought something out like a sort of re-edition, because they've done quite a few re-editions recently. They're not scared of a re-edition.
They're not. And like the remaster series is a good example of that.
Yeah.
That latest watch, that's a bold move. I know they're making it in low numbers, and it's like they don't need to necessarily make it a huge commercial success. No. But respect to them for doing that watch. You know, that's a serious piece of design.
100%. This is AP to me, through and through. I know that we've got a lot of diverse watches on the table, and maybe it's why I like the code so much. It takes this, the design language of the traditional watch, marries it with a bit of, the AP Royal Oak, and made something that is. I just respect brands that look back at their history and they're good. AP, they're so rich in that way. I don't think I've thought about it so deeply until now, and now I'm really sort of. Do you know something? Is it coming out? Is it coming back?
Let's hope. Well, that's a really good place to talk about the future of AP. Because Ilaria Resta took over in 2024 after a very long tenure from François Benamais, and he's done so much at the brand.
Yep.
People might not agree with everything he's done, but he's had a huge impact.
Yes.
So in her shoes, how does she carry the brand forward?
That is a brutal question. Well, let's just first... He's arguably one of the, he's up there with Jean-Claude himself, one of the most impactful personalities and CEOs of the watch world has seen in recent history. He took AP from relative obscurity, they weren't what they are now when he started. It's almost an impossible comparison to make because the AP are not in the same position. For me, I'm not qualified to have a detailed opinion, and I'm not on the inside. But as a lover of the brand, as a collector, as an enthusiast, and as somebody who wants to spend their money with AP, I would just love them to connect back to the archives. Do something for that core base that just want to see this sort of stuff. I'm not saying make it all about that, but for me, it's going back to the archives, the case shapes, the interesting... And allow collectors, new collectors. We get quite protective about, it's just, you've only been around this game a year, you don't understand. No, these are just new collectors coming into this world. And I think brands have a responsibility and collectors have a responsibility to help people learn more about the brand, dig into the archives, make it easier for new collectors who maybe are Instagram-led or TikTok-led or whatever to understand where AP came from. Which is what I think they're doing a really interesting job of with the 150th, and the way they're touring. I don't know if you've seen the Dollhouse, and it takes you through their history. And I think, for me, that is how you make a brand like AP even more successful as you honour your roots and honour your heritage. And I hope to see that. What about you?
I just want to see them, similarly tap into their history, move outside of the Royal Oak range. Whether we agree or not on whether it's a one-watch brand, they do need to diversify their portfolio more, especially when you compare it to the other Holy Trinity brands. Their range scope seems way wider, and I think for me, AP just needs to bring in a little bit more in terms of range and in terms of choice, and diversify their catalogue a little bit more. That's what I'd like to see. And I think part of that is bringing in Quantum Perpetual in 2025.
That bracelet is nice. It feels like one of those watches, because they've not been in vogue for so long, this sort of a bracelet. Again, they're not... Okay, let's just also figure out how this is made. This is handmade. I'm 99% sure it is. It's an art in and of itself, almost a lost art, in the sense of it, in the collector's perspective. Wouldn't that be really cool? Just to expand what a watch is again.
Indeed, and we published an article on the site 2 weeks ago with that very topic, saying, is it time to bring back the dress bracelet and make that part of the design of the watch? And I agree 100%. I think it's a neglected part, not like a sporty industrial oyster bracelet, but like a basket weave or intricate interlinked dress bracelet.
You've really got me thinking about whether it's a one... What do you mean by one watch brand? Do you mean they focus too much on it, or do you mean that all collectors want to see is the Royal Oak?
I think the latter.
Okay.
It's very evident to me that customers walk into AP boutiques and say, I want a Royal Oak, and whilst that happens, it's difficult for the brand to justify releasing other watches.
Because it's commercially wouldn't be a good decision, is that?
Exactly.
So you're stuck in a sort of a difficult commercial position. But then Patek have in some senses discontinued, certainly the steel Nautilus, you can only get it in white gold. And I think that's their attempt to diversify away from everybody just getting, not that you can just buy one now, but I think that's their attempt to sort of push the focus out to the wider catalogue. But I couldn't see AP doing that, sort of saying you can only buy it in gold
No,
or platinum, you know, something like that.
no, they wouldn't do it. I think they would continue to sell the Royal Oak as it is now, but I do think that they have room to bring in some different watches.
Favourite AP of all time?
I would have to say my favourite AP of all time is going to be the most cliched choice ever. 5402,
Fair enough.
very first Royal Oak. It's just so good. I love it.
It is, you know, that's a very fair choice. I won't judge you at all for maybe you're the man making it a one-watch brand.
That's right. I'm guilty of doing that. How about you?
I would probably go with, again, just because of historical provenance. I'm sorry if I butcher the reference. I'm fairly sure it's the first 55, I think it's 5512, something like that. But it's the first perpetual that they introduced. It was on a heavily modified movement. They made 9 of them. Again, I just think that's where I would go with the brand. But I think that's because that's how I think of AP right now. It's just getting back to that core watchmaking. And that's why I like their experimental stuff. I'm not a non-offshore person, but that's largely where you see a lot of their experimental watches. And they're always doing cool stuff.
Yep. Well, I think prediction 2026 Watches and Wonders, Quantium Perpetual on a bracelet. Let's go with that.
That would be, you would, I think, make a lot of people very happy. But we missed something really important, which is their material choices. They just released the blue. Did you know that the blue ceramic, the original blue ceramic that they released a few years ago, it was never supposed to be that colour? AP say this themselves. They just couldn't get the darker shade of blue that they wanted because it's so difficult to manufacture ceramics in colours. So this year, the colour that they've just released is the colour that they're aiming for, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, that is cool. And it's a good point. I'm glad you raised it because I do think AP has become not a pioneer of ceramic because I think that's probably more IWC's crown, but they've really invested in it.
Massively.
And I think the Royal Oak with that bracelet looks incredible in ceramic and the way they've engineered it and finished it, it's special.
I very recently saw the blue one, not the dark blue, the first blue one, and you pick it up and it is just cool. You know, it's brands playing with materials. I really associate that with AP. They are so good at pushing the boundaries, trying out new materials, and maybe not everything's to everyone's taste. But you see the white perpetual, the blue perpetuals. They're interesting. You know, they're fun watches, and you see John Mayer get Ed Sheeran. I think he has a piece unique. It's a full white ceramic with the albums on the dial. Again, might not be for you. You might think, Ed, I would have done it differently. But that is a man that took the time, was approved through this process. I don't know, that's pop culture for me. And again, that's a good marriage and perhaps a good sort of wrap up on what it all means is they play in pop culture really well, but they still make cool watches. They're not compromising on the integrity of what they're making in order to be relevant, which is why I respect it.
Yeah, and I think that is a great place to finish because to me that what you said sums up the brand perfectly.
I try.
But before we go,
Oh,
just
God.
quickly, of the watches on the table, including the one you're holding, what are you going to take home?
I'm taking this. I'm taking this. The pocket watch is very cool, but I'm not quite eccentric enough to rock that. I'm taking this. I'd wear that. I'd enjoy it. As you said at the start, when people come and ask me about my watch, I quite like the talking points around it that excite me, which is mechanics and history. Closely probably followed by the Blue Dial Royal Oak. What about you?
I'm taking that Blue Dial Royal Oak
It's
for
nice.
sure. Yeah, it's so good. Like we've already spoken about. To me, that's just the essence of the Royal Oak. Steel, smaller case size, and that Blue Dial is special.
It's a very wearable unisex watch. I've seen it on men, I've seen it on women. It looks great. I love
Indeed.
that. You've got me hyped now. I hope next year it is some big releases.
Let's see. Maybe we predict it. Let's find out. But it's also worth mentioning that these watches and others are going to be included in a exclusive 150th anniversary collection on the watch collecting platform. So head to the website to check those out now. We'll put Emily's social handle in the description so you can go and check out all of her content. And we'll be back soon with some more content. Take care.